Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello.
Order in the court.
So this is the penultimate colloquium of the semester and academic year, and we are thrilled that Asale will be presenting on Starlings in Winter. She'll be introduced by Imani Uzori, who was raised in rural North Carolina, and she's an award-winning vocalist, composer, librettist, and experimental ethnographer. She composes, performs, and creates interdisciplinary works for theater, ritual performance, chorale, chamber ensemble, sound art, and film. And these often deal with themes of ancestral memory, magical realism, liminality, Black American vernacular culture, and spiritual landscapes. She has been commissioned by the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, the Ford Foundation, Harvard Fromm Players, and the Chamber Music of America. She is also an alum fellow here of the Hutchins Center. And that is where she began her work on the forthcoming experimental chamber opera, Hush Arbor. Please welcome Imani.
Transitional object. A traveler, one who gathers what is seemingly disparate, weaves a tapestry rich in contrast, made more vibrant by threads in which she sews. A wide mind, a capacious soul, a generous spirit who can sit with an archive, make an account as well as imagine, sit with comrades as a witness, a reveler, astute yet mysterious. She is her own cartography and invites us in through her various modalities of expression, of scholarship, art making. And she is indeed a world chronicler, a world builder. She is a world, powerful and impeccable. The way she merges archival research, Black feminist scholarly analysis, healing modalities, and visionary creativity in her work. Asale Angel-Ajani writes against erasure. Her fiction and nonfiction centers Black women pushed to the edges of record, those criminalized, dismissed, or made invisible. She is the author of A Country You Can Leave, a New York Times recommended book, a Women's National Book Association Great Group Read, and an Amazon editor's fiction pick. Her first book, Strange Trade, the story of two women who risked everything in international drug trade, emerges from her long-term research with African immigrant women held in Europe's largest female prison, located in Rome, where she became the first American writer allowed into Italy's prison system. A graduate of Stanford University, where she earned a PhD in anthropology, Asale learned to braid fieldwork, archival marginalia, and the jaundiced eye of a chronicler into a singular voice. An example of this is her forthcoming book, American Inheritance, Family Archives of Racial Terror, to be published next year. Born in California, she has lived in Rome and Hong Kong, and now makes her home in New York. I am thrilled and beyond proud to introduce my dear friend and steadfast comrade, Asale Angel-Ajani.
Oh, I guess I don't need this because I'm all mic'd up here. And you all can hear me. Great, okay. So, I feel so kind of sad a little bit because it's the end of this journey. that feels like it just began. So I want to extend first more than a few thanks, particularly to this front row here. So Professor Skip Gates, thank you so, so much. Dr. Abby Wolf, thank you so much. And Dr. Krishna Lewis, thank you so much. And this one here, Imani Yazuri, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I don't think I've ever been introduced in such a lovely way before, so I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for bringing New York flavor up here and on this beautiful day. And thank you all for being here during this incredible weather, which I'm sure by tomorrow it'll be raining, given my experience of Cambridge. So I want to say this before I begin, which is another sort of extended thanks, not to forget my fellow fellows who've been an absolute lovely posse. Thank you. But the center itself has been a place where I have felt a kind of renewed hope in academia from last year to this year, from last spring to today. These institutions have not served us well, and the center has been a really unique space that has, as I've seen, witnessed on Saturdays, children from the community coming through to learn from elders, for elders to come from local centers to be part of and express themselves in this room on evening public events. This is a rare gem that we are losing in other places in the country, and I don't think can be replicated anywhere else in the country. So thank you so much for that. I'm really, it has given me hope. I'm sure momentarily, but it has given me hope. Okay, I also want to thank for today's talk, Dulce Danielle Bartir, who is a Black feminist thinker, dabbler in all things Black jazz. Her work on the Black Jazz blogspot that she has managed and run for the past, I think now 5 years, serves as sort of as a source of some of this information. And she is someone who is not, she's not a scholar, she's a dancer and a model who has given us this gift of these archives that she has made public for everyone. And she's done that out of love of women and men and queer folks who participated in early jazz life and forms. And anyway, so I want to thank Danielle if you're watching. Thank you. Okay, another caveat, and then I promise I'll begin. Almost, maybe. As I was telling Michael in the back, when I'm mic'd up and I hear my voice amplified, I do tell a few jokes. Just laugh, it'll move me along. Okay, so this is a science bit. Here's the thing. There is something called the disclosure effect that is the stuff of TED Talks. And it's the idea that you talk about something before it's done, and it gives you this sort of dopamine hit, and it's this sense of mission accomplished, right? Now, that's great if you're doing laundry, if you have to do laundry, or repetitive corporate tasks, but it is not great for a novelist, which is what I'm coming to you today as. There are lots of taboos. You can get writers in a room for an entire weekend, and we will never ask that one question, what are you working on? Because, and I don't know, my poet friends can tell me if that's the same for poetry, but the superstition is that novelists, we treat our stories and characters and worlds that we're building like fickle, highly private celebrity lovers. Our stories choose us, and they will leave us if we talk about them too much, if we get too much into the details with strangers about our various affairs. And you can't put that much weight on a novel. So here's the thing. Words and stories might dissipate, so I'm sending this up to those who control novelistic forms. Words and stories might dissipate and find another, more quieter soul to settle into, but I'm hoping that we're walking a fine line here by, by talking about a novel instead of me reading from it. So I'm inviting you on this journey with me. Thank you. That is my long caveat. Okay, so here's the structure of the talk. And I'm so grateful that it seems that my slides will actually work, breaking a long term. So here's the breakdown. First, I'm going to give you a few minutes of origin story, which is the precursor of how I found, or this story found me. And then I'm going to set the scene for you about some of the women in my novel in progress. And then we're going to move to a catalyst moment in the lives of these women and millions of other individuals around the world. Then we're going to zoom into the two main characters, and there's so much to say about them. So please feel free to ask any questions during the Q&A or whenever. It's fine. I'm fine. And I'm going to make sure that I keep time. So Professor Gates, I'll be looking at you. Okay, so let me acknowledge this, and then I promise I'm going to start clicking this, and we're going to run through this. It is hard and strange to talk about Russia at this moment, right? So I'm just going to acknowledge that. Previously, in previous periods, for some Americans, depending on age and education and political predilections, but especially for Black Americans, Russia served as sort of a slightly tarnished North Star. And I think that that's something, I'm sure all of us have a Russian story, right? From either grandparents, great-grandparents, and I think also too, if you're coming from a family that loves books, you know, the Russian canon was what we largely read from. So I, despite my youthful appearance, you would never know that my parents met as babies on their high school Black Panther Party newspaper. And so I grew up sort of in the shadows momentarily before the DEA took my dad. I grew up momentarily in the shadows of the vanguard and of Marx and Mao. So it was surprising then to find among my mother's things the photo of I didn't know it at the time, the photo of the last Tsar. And this is, I think, taken about 7 years before they were killed by bayonet and grenades. And just to give you a sense of how this photo has somehow indelibly imprinted on me, because I have assumed that this photo was encased in a silver frame. I think probably because I was wondering why we didn't have a lot of money, so I was like, why do we have these rich relatives and nobody's giving us anything? My sister remembers it, my twin sister, hi Lyra, remembers it differently, and she says it's just a number of photos that were cut out from a magazine that was among my mother's things. Anyway, when I wrote my first novel, A Country You Can Leave, yes, this is a minor plug, it was something that Russia was a feature in the book. The main character is Russian, and she's the mother of the Black protagonist, Lara. And there's a distant and idealized Russia sort of all over the fingerprints of this book. Okay. While writing A Country You Can Leave, I was doing research, this was many years ago, I came across the film The Circus by Grigory Alexandrov. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this film. If you haven't, it's kind of an interesting, funny epitome of Stalinist era propaganda films. It starts off with Marion Dixon who is running from an angry mob in the South, carrying a blanket, which we assume is a baby, her son. And they're shouting at her in sort of unintelligible English on this Moscow set. And she jumps onto a train, and then she lands in Moscow, I guess, years later. The scene that most people talk about, this film is widely talked about, the scene that people talk about, there are several, is of Lloyd Patterson, who, as some of you may know, comes to the Soviet Union in 1933 with a cadre of black artists from the US, and to make a film called The Black and White. Anyway, Lloyd and his son James there's a scene where James is being passed around in the crowd, and there are multiple ethnicities sort of singing in their language, and in the subtitles it'll say singing in some foreign tone, or singing in some unintelligible where they pass him from, men who are singing to him in Yiddish, and men who are singing to him in Yiddish or in Mongolian or Chinese, so it's quite this thing. And then of course the last scene is where they are marching in the streets in Moscow, and the line is, "I don't know of another country where a man can breathe so freely under the banner of Stalin." So the scene that captured my attention when I was first watching this film was this one, where there was a black maid in the film, and I was curious because she was not attributed, she had no byline. And so I started looking her up, and it turns out that she was misnamed as Coretti Arl-Tietz, who I'm going to talk about in just a minute. This is probably more likely Frances E. Thomas, who is an actress who came also with the 1933 group who stayed in Russia to make this film in 1936. Excuse me. So my search for Coretti Arl-Tietz led me to the Amazon Guard. And they were formed in 1901 by a German a German impresario who, I didn't spill in anything, I promise, Abby. I don't want to do a Donald Trump moment where I'm like holding the bottle. So anyway, she was Paula Korn-Waller, who is a German impresario, was very wealthy, and her husband actually was the one who ran theaters all over Germany and Dresden, etc. She came to New York, and she got this great idea one day, talking to her sister, that she was going to form her own troupe. And so she ended up hiring 8 women. So she hired Ali Burgoyne, who was a 26-year-old singer, Fanny Wise, who was a 19-year-old singer from Brooklyn. Ali is from Chicago. She hired Florence Collins, who is also 26 years old from Kentucky, Alvaretta Burley, who is 19 from Baltimore, St. Gibray, who is 32, a wife and from Virginia, who is up in New York, and she hired Emma Harris, who was 29 and married at the time. So Coretti Hardy, at the time, was her name, was hired 19, and so was Fanny Smith, but those two are not pictured here. And unfortunately, I only know the possible names. I can't attribute this photo of Emma Harris and Ali Burgoyne. So I want to pause here for just a second because I'm not going to talk about Ali, who is a main character in my book. She kind of serves as the bridge between the U.S. and Russia. She lived in Russia, in St. Petersburg and Moscow, kind of mix, for a period of 14 years. And she would travel back and forth and tell her friends what the scene was like. So if anyone ever got any ideas about going back to New York to try to make a name for themselves, she would kind of warn them against it. But Ollie is someone who, because she came to the troupe with previous stage experience, when the women decided to fire their Paula, they nominated Ollie to be the head of their troupe. And what's rare for this time, in 1901, these 6, 7, 8 women took Paula to the German courts and received back wages because she had been exploiting them, and also they were given their autonomy because they were allowed to cut their contract with her. So other troops, as you probably know, like the Florida Creole girls, they ended up, getting into fistfights, and the police came. This is in Helsinki, but anyway, this was handled a different way slightly. Okay, so 1901. Ollie decides that she's going to leave with Florence, and they're cast in the London run of In Dahomey. And then Emma Harris takes over. So my 2 central characters that I'm working with, who are sort of in this seance of writing, if you will, is Emma Harris and Creddy Arl Tietz. And these are variations of their multiple last names that they've changed, taken on, married into. So I'm going to read a little bit here because I have a point that I want to make. So Emma was born in 1871 outside of Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, and was, and 1871, as you know, is 6 years after the official end of slavery. Her parents, Sarah Green and Richard Matthews, raised Emma and their children on the edge of the plantation that had enslaved them and continued to enslave them or held them in bondage as sharecroppers. For some unknown, I do not know why, but Emma was fortunate enough, had enough perseverance, was intelligent, who knows? But she made her way from that plantation as a sharecropper to, she was sent by her parents to Norfolk, Virginia, where she ended up studying 2 things. She studied in the Negro Mission College, and then she decided on her own that she was going to come up to Boston and enroll herself in the Boston Music Conservatory, where, thanks to Danielle, we know that she was a chambermaid and supported her musical studies in Boston as while she studied. Okay, so during a performance in Brooklyn, Emma meets Joseph B. Harris, and he's a janitor from Brooklyn, and they get married, and they have a kid that does not survive infancy. And after that, she decides she works as a domestic, and she starts singing in her church and has sort of given up on on stage life until she sees the advertisement for the European tour, which she finds by chance on a newspaper that's on the seat of her train car that she's riding in. Coretti was born, in 1883 in a small upstate town, and her parents, Carrie and Thomas Hardy, were both from Virginia, and they would eventually move the entire family up to New York City to the San Juan Hill area. Coretti, at the time that she saw the advertisement for this European touring group, is working as in the basement as a copyist, and singing at her church, and she has no official musical training. Okay, now I'm going to read this just for context, so bear with me. I know it's I'm starting to feel a little like, come on, I need your energy, folks. Thank you, thank you. So from 1871, the year that Emma Harris was born, to 1901, when she and Coretti left the United States, for 30 solid years, there were multiple highly publicized mass murders or acts of domestic racial violence and terror against Black people, and to say nothing of the violence that was unreported or underreported. In New York City, in 1900, there are 2 incidents, the New York City race riots in August, and then a few months later, in October, the Tenderloin race riots. So in 30 years, Emma's life, and 19 years of Coretti's life, it was especially terrible and a violent time to be, I don't mean to laugh, terrible and a violent time to be Black, to be Native, to be Chinese, to be Irish, to be Jewish, to be non-white. So this is just to provide some context. So this was, yeah. The women arrive in Russia in 1903 after touring all over the Ottoman Empire and Germany. And again, this is all under Ollie Burgoyne's direction and then later Emma Harris's direction. They travel all over Europe. They arrive in Russia in 1903, and they land in one of the best, most reputable, not reputable, famous, let's say, or infamous places to perform was the Aquarium Theater and the Yar Restaurant, which I do not have a photo of. Though they were self-governed, they were women alone. They did not have a male escort or manager. They were women alone. And that meant that they had to wrestle every penny from the hands of greedy men who ran the clubs, including the much despised Charles Armand and the slightly better Frederick Bruce Thomas, who is the subject of the book called The Black Russian by Vladimir Alexandrov. His story is incredible. It was worthy of a book, so no shade. His story is one that sort of transcends both the U.S. to Russia to Istanbul, Turkey. He's got an incredible story. Anyway, he was the maitre d' at both of these places. And I'm just going to read quickly a description from Thomas about what it was like, what this was like, kind of atmospherically. So he says, when you turn off the hot and noisy street and enter, you are greeted by a refreshing light breeze. Numerous lanterns sway in the trees like fireflies. The moon floats overhead like large frosted balls filled with light. Flags wave cheerfully above the kiosk and stages. Large groups of people strolling along the sandy paths make a rustling sound reminiscent of waves gently washing a beach. Ahead from the stage, the enticing sound of an orchestra can be heard. The footlights are surrounded by a rainbow of crystal vases. You see the joyful, excited smiles of women dressed in light fabrics, their sparkling eyes, their thirst for fun and love, wine, or maybe just money. The visitors assume with cynicism because they've been there before. So this is a really lovely description of the Aquarium Theater, but the women from the Louisiana Guard under Harris weren't thrilled to have to work there, right? In part was because at the Aquarium and other places, they had to do things that they would otherwise, from a moral standpoint, would probably not want to do. So they were hypersexualized. And they sort of decided to organize themselves collectively, not just women from the Louisiana Guard, but all African-American performers would organize themselves lovers. So lovers of counts, of duchesses or dukes, and these folks, patrons, if you will, would augment their salary. And this was a time of incredible, in 1903, 1904, it was an incredible time of of wealth. The super wealthy in Russia were super wealthy. They had money to burn, and they literally did. There are stories of people who would just hand women, especially if they thought that they were being exploited by the men who were in charge, they would just give them thousands upon thousands in a night of ruble that they would stuff in their dresses. And Laura Bowman has a great scene where she talks about that in her memoir. So all of this was happening under strain, right? So 300 years of tension and repression and the slow, exhaustive grip of poverty was starting to strangle the edges of the city and moved kind of like a plague between the outskirts to the country and from the country to the city, right? So the women of Louisiana Guard decided that they needed to disband because things were getting a little tight in Russia at the time. And so they decided to move to travel to Finland. And I am certain that when they were heading towards Finland, that they witnessed from the windows of the private cabins of the trains that they were in, or from their plush horse-drawn carriages, that they witnessed the poverty of the people who were living on their along the path here. So they're in Helsinki. They come back, and this is the Winter Square, the Winter Palace and the square that's right outside. They come back to Russia at the end of 1904, and they head to St. Petersburg, where at the invitation of the jockey William Canton, he invites them to a party. So the apartments and the balconies overlook the Winter Palace, from the Winter Palace overlooks the square. And in the pre-dawn morning, through their stupor of too much champagne and food and music, someone starts to hear the sound of 10,000 boots crunching in the snow as Cossacks are starting to take their position on the square. From the windows, Coretti and Emma and others look down on what would be called the Bloody Sunday Massacre. That starts the long journey toward 1917. So I want to play this. I'm going to see if I can do this from here. This is, I believe, a clip from Lenin's film. So the Bloody Sunday Massacre is it is a very contested set of facts. But one thing that I hope you don't mind, I'm going to read from my favorite book about all things early Russia, that I was very lucky that they had at the library here, and they're going to kill me because I got the cover wet. I shouldn't say that out loud. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to dry it out. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So this is from one of the most contested facts of the Bloody Sunday Massacre was Father Gapon's role in this march. And I want to say this because I find this interesting, so forgive me for a minute. When the workers were gathering each other, they would go through from factory to factory on the morning of January 9th. They would go from factory to factory gathering their comrades, their friends, their neighbors, saying, come on, we're going to go seek the truth from the Tsar. Now, truth in the Russian language is much deeper than just the truth in American language, right? It is a truth that is rooted in something more spiritual, more all-encompassing. They needed to know. They needed the truth from the Tsar. And part of one of the contested facts was whether or not the petition that Father Gapon was bringing to Nicholas, who was not there, and he knew that, was whether or not this petition adequately represented the needs of workers. And I'm just going to read this to you because I think this is pretty stunning. And this is from their petition. We workers and residents of the city of St. Petersburg of various ranks and stations Our wives, our children, and helpless old parents have come to thee, sire, to seek justice and protection. We have become beggars. We are oppressed and burdened by labor beyond our strength. We are humiliated. We are regarded not as humans, not as human beings, but as slaves who must endure their bitter fate in silence. Sire, there are many thousands of us here. We have the appearance of human beings, but in fact, neither we nor the rest of the Russian people enjoy a single human right, not even the right to speak, to think, assemble, discuss our needs, or to take steps to improve our condition. And the petition goes on, but just to make it clear that whatever anyone will say about this petition and whether it adequately represented the needs of Russian workers, I think that it does. So in this context, and in the context that I laid out earlier, we have Emma and Coretti, they break up. They decide to go their separate ways. I don't know what happened to them. That's stuff of novels, so we'll get there at some point. But after the Bloody Sunday massacre, the women leave, and they leave each other. They no longer are ever. So, and I just want to impress upon you, Coretti spends the rest of her life in Russia, which is 50 years. And Emma spends 45 years in Russia. And never once are they mentioned together past this moment. They never tour together. They don't perform on stage together. They're never together past this moment. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's wow. Anyway, so I'm going to focus in on, this is the part of the talk, we're getting closer, where I'm going to focus in on two of my main characters. And I'm going to keep this kind of short. I'm going to start with how you would say Emma's name in Russian. This is not my voice. Let's see if it works. Okay, so Emma Harris is someone who becomes a writer, a filmmaker, an actress. All of this will go much later. But her revolutionary origin story, which every revolutionary has to have an origin story, her revolutionary origin story is of the time when she first meets Lenin. And I know, isn't that an origin story? Of course, and I'm sure it is crafted specifically for that effect. So Emma would tell this story often about being in a March day, March 11th, 1918, where she happens upon a Bolshevik rally where she is pulled up, she's singled out, pulled up on stage by Lenin himself, where he turns to her and the crowd and announces the following. The ideal communist is to open the road for all the downtrodden races of the world. For you, comrade, especially, we regard your race the most downtrodden in the world. We want you to feel when you come to Russia that you are a human being. The Red Army is ready to give its life at any time for all the downtrodden races. So, and she has a real, for me, what is a challenge is that I also know that Lenin had complicated views. He had complicated views about the quote-unquote Negro question. And that's for another time. But Emma spends a lot of time later on in life kind of talking about how she spent hours among the hundreds of thousands of people who lined up when Lenin died, and they were standing in the snow waiting to pass his open casket. And I have photos, I didn't include them here for the sake of time, but it's an incredible, incredible scene to witness. So for Emma, her revolution dies when Lenin does. And part of what I'm looking at in the book is thinking through questions of betrayal, and I can talk about that later. What's interesting about about Emma being the good Bolshevik that she was, or seemed like she might have been. The other side, the flip side of her, was that she was actually potentially held in prison 3 times. The Gulag in 1905 during the Russo-Japanese War, where she talks about she's being accused of being a spy for the Americans, for the Japanese, but through America, through the US. And she's being accused by one of her lovers, we'll talk about them in just a minute, and they come and they take her and they throw her in the Gulag. It takes her months to get out, months. And so she's making all of these appeals, and the only way that she's able to get out is that the consul, Samuel Smith, has heard, wait a second, you're telling me there's an American woman in a Gulag in Siberia? We must get her out. And when she goes a year later to thank him, he is astonished that she's a black woman and disappointed, right? And so she's like, forget it. This is when any idea of her going back to the US dies in that moment, because she's like, I am not going to face this racism anymore, right? I'm not doing this. In Odessa, the second time, potentially, in Odessa, briefly, Emma is being accused of being involved in the murder of a daughter of an Austrian millionaire. Now, okay, her name is Ophelia Garinda. I can't find anything on this family, but who in 1913, some say she committed suicide, but her parents thought that maybe she was murdered. And because Garinda was hanging around Emma as a young woman, hanging around Emma, wanting to be her apprentice, wanting to learn from her, she was last seen with Emma, and Emma had one of her boas. Now, I can imagine that Emma was probably like, get this woman out of here. But that's for another story. And in 1919, the third time, was she was held in the famous Lubyanka prison, which is the tallest building in Moscow. There's this great joke that it's Lubyanka, which is the current head of the FSB. This is where the FSB is located now, and also where the KGB museum is in this contemporary moment. But it's said that Lubyanka is the tallest building in Moscow because you can see Siberia from its basements, right? And the joke is that because the prisoners were actually taken to the top floor of this building, but it's a windowless room, so they had no idea where they were, right? So you could see Siberia from the basement. Okay, I thought that was funny. Okay, but a softer side, one of the things that I want to also recognize that in addition to her 3 times being incarcerated, she also ran brothels and she ran theaters, and she was quite a character. She did everything she possibly could to survive. But one of my favorite stories about Emma was how I was writing in Troika, which for those of you who don't know, is this horse-drawn carriage or buggy kind of thing. And you get in and it's low to the ground and you're bundled up in all of these beautiful furs and whatever to keep warm. But she would talk about touring Russia because it was there was no transport. She would tour Russia on troikas, and the wolves would be running after her at night, right? And just, and so they would have to, get these horses moving as quickly as possible. And to me, that's such a romantic side of her. And because she was with her fake Count Baranov, who would later turn her in as a spy because she got mad at him because he was stealing money from her. That's a whole other long story, but apparently he was very handsome. So anyway, so that's a side of that. I'm going to turn, and I want to say this. So what we know about Emma Harris is actually could be encapsulated in 3 separate articles, okay, which is really sad. We don't know much in actual fact about Emma Harris's life. And it all comes from this retrospective sort of positioning, her doing interviews toward the end of her life. And Langston Hughes wrote about her, and he called her the Mammy of Moscow. And then this sort of became the name that she was known under, the Mother of Moscow and other forms. This became the name that she was known for in the US. And so there are only, as far as I know right now, only 3 pieces of public information that you can gather on her. Now, in Germany, she has books that she's published. She's not actually in the Russian State Archive, which is kind of crushing. So we only have 2 photos of her. Even the time of her death is, some people say she died in 1945, and some people say she died in 1936. The closest that I can get is that maybe she left the US in 1936. I have no idea, but she did come back to the US toward the end of her life and regretted it immensely. So her story is defined by men. I mean, they wrote about her, that was it. So Ted Poston, who was also part of the 1933 group, and others. Okay, so Coretti. I'm going to play this because it's a little bit of a musical, just to give you a sense. I don't know what Emma Harris sounds like. Pale Moon, and it's, and again, thanks to Danielle, who has put this up, the whole song on YouTube for people to listen to. This is Coretti with her husband, who is also a musician, a pianist, and other things. Okay, so Coretti's life is vastly different than, after they separate, Coretti's life is vastly different than Emma's. So Coretti decides that she's going to turn to wealth, and she ends up becoming more Russified. And she marries into a very, very wealthy, non-religious Jewish family, and who are in Russian oil, and she ends up having 2 children. During this period, she has to spend a lot of time sort of justifying her desire to become a Russian grande dame, right? She's never had any formal musical training, so she starts to take lessons at various conservatories, and does well. But I'm going to tell you. It's only fair. So Coretti also has a revolutionary origin story. So her origin story starts a lot later than Emma Harris's. She decides to leave her very wealthy family. In fact, they kind of put her out, and without her children. One child dies when she's on tour, and that was it. The child became very sick. And the family said, forget it, you can't be an artist and a mother. You can't. Off you go. You're on your own. So, and so she leaves one of her children behind. During this period, she decides that she's going to take up with students at the various conservatories, and they invite her to a factory that's holding a concert. And the factory the setting is immensely beautiful. It's in the wheat fields, it's a summer, and she decides to do the thing that she doesn't want to do, which is to dress as a Negro spiritualist. So she, head wrap, tattered clothes, and goes out on stage, and it becomes a defining moment of her career because she has spoken through her voice to the inner workings of everyone watching this beautiful event, right? I mean, it just screamed of revolutionary fervor and proletarianism, all the things. And so that's how she became known. So from that period.
What year was that?
That was I think it was in 1920. I'll have to look that up. So for me, the period, the thing that contrasts, so she spends all of this time, this is a tour poster of her, just to show you the success that she has. She's singing at one of the state philharmonics. Unfortunately for her, she has a lot of regret. She's still attached to being a jazz singer, which is not something she wants, right? She meets Marian Anderson when Anderson comes to Russia, and all her letters, which of course the Russian music critics talk about, like she doesn't know how to, her Russian writing is really poor, and she didn't actually really speak Russian all that well, which was the opposite of Emma, who spoke Russian like fluently. Anyway, this is a concert poster which shows that she's performing jazz music at the State Philharmonic. For me, the contrast to her story was Maxim Gorky. So for those of you who know Maxim Gorky, he's a writer, very supportive of the revolution. He's a contrarian, he's a radical, he's a sexist. And he used to have these salons where they would, at his apartment in Moscow, they would have these salons where people would drink and read excerpts from Marquis de Sade. And Coretti was often a guest there. And from there, you name the people that she met and knew and hobnobbed with, every writer, artist, anyone that you could think of, she was in contact with them. So now there's a quote from Gorky that when he first met Coretti that I think is kind of telling, and then I'm going to move to the last bit. He says, I'm never impressed by female artists. I have no use for them. But you, madam, I am your biggest fan. So my last slides are just kind of starting points for discussion. Obviously, these are two women of hundreds of women who were in Russia at the time. And so anyone can pluck a name and information and tell their incredible stories. There's one character for one person named Irene Ford who we have no information on, no images, no nothing, but she's also in the book. And anyway, that's neither here nor there, but, and then there are the enemies and associates and admirers with an asterisk. But to talk about the kind of possibilities, these are women who, yeah, actually, I want to go back to something here. Yeah, these are women who in their everyday occurrence in everyday lives were making history, and that's part of what this book is about. It's about ordinary people just participating, being part of history, in extraordinary ways, in ways that we can't know. These women touched and pressed into every possible moment in Russia and also the U.S. I'm going to I'll stop here, and I hope that you'll ask me questions about that. But I'm going to do this, and I hope you don't mind. Instead of reading from, I'm good timing, Asale. I'm patting myself on my back. So instead of reading something that I've written, I'm actually going to take from this title. And I have to thank Harry for this, because Harry sent me a different clip, but I'm going to do this. And there are a couple of technical glitches. Just overlook that, because I'm not technologically inclined. But I'm going to read from where the title comes from, which is a poem by Mary Oliver called Starlings in Winter. And I am no reader of poetry, but I will do my best. So that's me. Chunky and noisy, but with stars in their black feathers, they spring from the telephone wire instantly. And instantly, they are acrobats in the freezing wind, and now, in the theater of air, they swing over buildings, dipping and rising. They float like one stippled star that opens, becomes for a moment fragmented, then closes again. And you watch and you try, but you simply can't imagine how they do it. With no articulated instruction, no pause, only the silent confirmation that they are this notable thing. This wheel of many parts that can rise and spin over and over again, full of gorgeous life. O world, what lessons have you prepared for us? Even in the leafless winter, even in the ashy city, I am now thinking of grief and of getting past it. I feel my boots trying to leave the ground. I feel my heart pumping hard. I want to think again of dangerous and noble things. I want to be light and frolicsome. I want to be impossible, beautiful, and afraid of nothing. As though I had wings. So that is my talk. Thank you. Okay. That is a film clip from, he's Dutch, and now the name is slipping. Sorry, Jan. Yeah. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns?
Wow, that was fascinating. Is this on? No? Yes? No? What do I have to do? Thank you. That was, is that on now? No. You guys back there? Got that one? Okay. Is that on? No? Now they're both on. Now they're both on.
Off or on?
They're both off. Can we turn them on?
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you. Oh, that was fascinating. I'd never heard of these, either of these women. Just to think, you know, Ralph Ellison wrote a fabulous essay called "The Little Man at Cheehaw Station," and what it means is we were always already there, no matter where it was. One of us was there, right? But you're doing a novel about them.
Yeah, and
so would you also do an essay about them or a nonfiction version too?
Yeah, so I struggled, this entire year has been a struggle between how much verifiable information can I attach to these women with sources, because I know how historians think with verifiable sources, and so I could write something that was general nonfiction or nonfiction, and unfortunately there isn't that much that we can verify.
Right.
But yes, an essay, absolutely. An essay or even a couple of chapters. Ideally, it would be, my initial reaction was to go and do a general nonfiction work. But there's another thing that's part of this too, which is that there's a sort of self-fashioning from these women, which is all about their liberation, right? They chose who they were and what stories they would tell about themselves. So at the end of Coretti's life, she has created an entirely new persona, an entirely new identity. Instead of, she makes herself a much more sort of global subject by saying that her mother is from, I think she says her mother is from Mexico and her father is from the Caribbean, and they just happen to live in New York. So there's a lot of that, and out of respect for the ways that they want to, even from this perspective, they want to control their narrative. There's a part of me that feels like I have to honor that, but also extend their story even further. I mean, I'm sure there are ways for people to say, oh, Lennon never met, Emma Harris and never had private meetings with her where she sang to him and taught him the ways of Black America. But if
it's a novel,
Right. So
did they meet? Did Hughes and Robeson meet them?
So yes. So Emma and Coretti, the only time I know that they were together was when they were part of this welcoming party when Langston Hughes came with Dorothy West, and
right.
So yes, and then later when Robeson came, and Emma did not like Robeson. She said he had bad breath, and she didn't like working with him, and that he was kind of I don't know, but that she didn't like working with him because he was a bit of a, he was treated very well. And at the end of her time Emma in particular, at the end of her time in Russia, she is someone who no one wants to go near because she is so critical of Stalin's regime that people are afraid. And there's this idea that Stalin didn't execute Black Americans who spoke against him. He did, but he didn't touch Emma. And she ran her brothels, she ran her, she did her off-market selling of things, and she was an entrepreneur in that context, and they didn't touch her, but she was, her disappointment, her greatest disappointment was that the revolution did not live up to its promises. So, her journey is different, but yeah.
Well, final question. How did you hear about these people? How did you meet them, as it were?
So, so when I was initially looking for the who played the maid in the circus, and it was, an IMDb says that it was Coretti Arltiz, and I was like, who's that? And then started looking up Coretti, and because Coretti has so much more written about her, and because they toured early together, that's how you find Emma and the rest. And thanks to Danielle, who has pulled all of these stories together. And even her work can't be, I see people leaving comments for her all the time saying, where'd you get this? How can you attribute this? I want to, like, I need to know this. And she generally doesn't respond. She just sort of, it's.
Well, where's Danielle's stories?
Sorry?
You said Danielle has pulled together these stories?
Yes. So the earliest text written about, for example, Coretti is, that's published, is in Russian by a Russian music historian, right? And I'm trying to remember Yevgenya's last name. There's a lot of information about both of them in Russia. I shouldn't say a lot. That's not exactly right. There are a handful of articles and kind of bits of history that are written about these women, and all of the photos in this talk of Coretti come from the Russian State Archive. She was a Russian grande dame for the most part. There were, little asterisks underneath that because she didn't have quite the vocal range that some of the other Russian singers did. Whatever, vocalists. Sorry. Anyway,
this is incredible. I've been to Moscow to sing African American spirituals, jazz, and I'm just like, and Siberia. So I'm just like, wow, this is quite stunning to know this kind of hidden legacy that is just not brought out, you know. And so my question is, are there any recordings of her singing, of Coretti singing African American spirituals? I know we heard the kind of operatic-esque, you know, Marian Anderson-esque, but do we know if there's anything? And do you know if she ever came to, it didn't seem like you said she didn't like being known as a person who would sing these songs. Did she ever come to peace with that as she refashions herself later?
Oh, they made her dress in rags with a rag on her head.
Yeah. So one of her films that she sings spirituals in, and of course she is cast as the maid and nanny looking after the 15-year-old captain is the title of the film. That's pretty much the only recorded, publicly recorded songs that she has sung in English that are kind of more leaning towards spirituals. But I'm hoping, I don't know, we'll see what happens when I get my request ever, responded to, if the archivist in Russia will ever send any of these clips or anything of her singing.
And the last thing I want to comment is that it's Paul Robinson who called her Emma Harris the Mammy.
That was Langston Hughes.
Langston Hughes. Well, the interesting thing is a lot of Russians are Orthodox and also honor what we would call the Black Madonna.
Yeah.
So on some levels,
Yeah.
her being a Black, she's a walking icon.
Yes,
so it's appropriate.
absolutely.
She is
Yeah.
Mama.
Yeah.
Emma. I just wanted to reclaim that Mammy.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
No,
from
and
Langston.
it was
Yeah.
completely, I think, definitely in Langston Hughes' work, completely out of respect for her long time in Russia, and the fact that she was the mother of people who would come and need a good, Southern cooked meal. So, yeah.
And one went in 1903 and the other one went what year?
They all arrived in Russia in 1903, and then others, then they'd go back and forth. Coretti's the only one who left. I believe she left in the 20s. No, I'm sorry. She left before the revolution to go see her parents, but she was still married to Utin, who is the wealthy Jewish family. And her parents were not happy, despite their poverty, were not happy that she had come in with all of these riches. She was not allowed to enter into restaurants and stay in hotels that she would be able to stay in if she in Russia. So she was like, I'm never coming back here again. That was her one experience. She's done. She had all the money that she could possibly have and couldn't stay in the same hotel as her husband.
Did she meet Dorothy West?
She did meet Dorothy West. Yeah. Oh, what to say? I know that Dorothy met them. I don't have any commentary. Like Dorothy West mentions her, but it's around a whole bunch of other stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you.
Thank
this
you.
is great. We appreciate it. I had a question about, I had like two questions. One, like, how did they relate to the wars? Like, obviously, you mentioned like 1905, but also like World War I.
Yeah.
And then post 1917, like
Yeah.
the imperialists kind of invading, and had that impact or affect them and like their own thoughts about like what was going on at that time. And also just like a more general question, how do you write fiction about this? Like, I'm curious as to like the process, because it's like, it's more than even like just placing yourself into this like context. I'm wondering, like, yeah, like what's your process like to like reflect the times and how you do that without like the sort of contemporary biases or like influence in that writing. So yeah, I'm just curious about your process for like writing historical fiction like this. But, yeah.
Okay, so I'll address your first question, then your second question. And so the first question is that, especially for Emma, what she ended up doing, even before she claimed the party or the party claimed her. During World War I, she opened her home and turned it into a hospital. And then she later on worked with the equivalent of the Russian Soviet Red Cross. But she was always, and here's the thing, these were women who took advantage of their special status. So it's not so much Coretti, but Emma certainly. She was, if you needed something, if you needed a gun, if you needed a weapon, if you needed something, she would find it for you. So she knew everyone. So Coretti, there was a lot of movement between Russia and now what we call, Ukraine and Odessa. Specifically, they both lived there for a long period of time. So they were kind of buffered, but not really. So that's part of the question. I don't know, to your question of fiction and writing historical fiction, which for me, this clearly is an ambitious project, and I'm claiming it. I'm like, this is an ambitious project. I think that as a writer, what the main thing that you have to do is you pick something that's going to carry you into that world. So for me, it's character. These women, and not just these two women, but some others, are women who I feel very close to. There's an understanding there, and I live through their emotions. And then the history part of it comes in, because that stuff that's easy. The history of it is easy. The emotions, what does it feel like to have your lover send you to a gulag? You know, I mean, what is it like to have this, to be an artist who is not realized, right? And to blame your upbringing and your inability to arrive at the place where you think you need to be on the fact that you were born Black in the U.S. I mean, that's a huge, heavy burden to carry. I mean, all of these, and anyway, I'm going to stop there because I've got things to say about that. But, so these are just pieces that help me go into the text. Yeah.
I think it's a great project.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk and for the work. That was really fascinating. I mean, just to go off Kojo's second question, I was just wondering what are some historical fiction texts you turn to as like a model for what you're doing?
Okay, now I'm really going to be a bad person here. For this particular project, it's not historical fiction for me. I love historical, I don't know if I love historical fiction. Or I like reading books that didn't know that they were historical fiction. But this book, actually, I think, Selena, you know this person. Harrison Salisbury was the Moscow correspondent, and he wrote this amazing, beautiful, and anyone, it is from the library, and don't you dare recall this book from me. I am not done. It's called Black Night, White Snow, and this book has been so important in a way for me to think about how you take these, what was life like on the ground. It has a lot of texture. So anyway, that's my short answer to you. Hopefully short.
And what's the book about?
So the book is about the early days leading up to 1917 and beyond, actually. So it's, I mean, you can see it's a huge book, but it starts off, has the best opening of any book, where he talks about the scene. Okay, I have to set the scene. So in, I actually don't remember the period. Anyway, the scene is 5 inmates who are dragging pieces of wood into a courtyard that is attached to a vacant palace. The Tsar is not there. They have been brought there because they are building the platform on which they will be executed. It is so, and he talks about this. It's kind of the early morning, and you can hear other prisoners who are being held in this palace can hear the hammer and the nails against the wood. And they know what's happening. And what's happening is a revolution and a revolutionary. This is another revolutionary origin story. A revolution and a revolutionary was being born that night because of the 5, these were 5 students. These were rare individuals, 5 students. One of them happened to be Lenin's brother. And when he is executed, and it impacts, obviously, Lenin and his family. And Lenin is a boy. He's, a young man, very young. And so he picks up where his brother left off. So anyway, I get chills talking about it. Do not take this book. I will tell you. No. Oh, so it's very hard. It's a book that's very hard to get. So I was so, again, grateful to Harvard that they had this book and I could take it, and I was like, you don't even know what you have. I will return it. That's on record. Anyway, but thank you.
Asale, thank you for opening a whole new world. It was just mesmerizing, and I can't help but contrast the life these women would have had in Jim Crow America versus this splendor and how well they were treated in Russia. My question is about the Russian archives. How do you? Obviously, you've ingratiated yourself. You've been in the archives. How does a Western Black woman go about, finding essentially what's left over of the KGB and working your way in? I think this is incredible.
So, just for clarification, I have not been able to travel to Russia yet. And so a lot of the archives that I'm working with, I write to the librarian and it's digitized. So, but it's a slow-moving process, and it's actually a lot of where we are. There's what's the word I'm looking for? You can't get past certain firewalls if you're trying to reach out to people in Russia. So. That's a short answer.
I just ordered a paperback of the book.
I know, but I like it in hardcover, and I like that it feels closer to the.
Well, I was going to give it to you, but you don't want it.
I do want it. No, I'll take it. I will absolutely take it. Because I'm gonna have to give this book. Yes, it was. But I'm gonna have to give this book back at some point.
I think they have hardback too.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, Amazon.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Harry.
Testing. Asale, congratulations. This is a wonderful, wonderful project. And I have a similar question as to how you are, first of all, accessing the German archives around Emma.
So, oh gosh, you guys, why are you asking me questions about research? I'm just kidding. The German archives are easier, and so I actually, and my sister's partner is German, and so yeah, it's not. Sorry. So it's not that difficult. There's actually not that. I mean, let me back up and say this. Specifically for Emma, there are only a couple of things in the German archives that relate to Emma Harris, period. So some of her books are published in Germany, and then of course the court case is all on record. And a couple of their tour dates and the theaters that they went to, but that stuff is not hard to access.
To access. Never let truth get in the way of a good story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Who do you see playing these two leads when HBO inevitably does the... And have you picked out the shoes yet?
Okay, Harry, stop. That's enough. That is enough. Yeah, I can't answer that question, but.
Beyonce and Rihanna.
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah. So. No, I know. I'm just. No.
And then maybe like a Rihanna or Tiana, one of the pop stars for
Yeah.
How far are you into the novel?
So I have about 75, well, okay, so I have over 40,000 words is what I'm going to put right now. Although I can't say that it's necessarily something that I feel like I'm ready to, yeah, it's not done. And so for me as a novelist, I have to get to at least a preliminary end. So that's what I'm working toward now. Yeah.
I have an idea.
Tell me.
If you drop me a note saying that you want to do research on these two people who lived in Russia between 1903 and whatever, I could ask American ancestors who in the worldwide network of genealogists is working in Russia or on Russia.
Oh, that would be great. That would be excellent.
Because if you go to Russia, you're going to get arrested.
Yes,
so you can forget that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you could likely get arrested, right?
Yeah.
But there are always researchers working.
Right.
And always people doing
Yeah.
genealogy here who are fluent Russian. So you don't
Yeah.
have to wait on the archive.
so generous
You can
of
just
you.
hire somebody there.
Yeah, that's really, really generous of you. Thank you.
See?
I mean, because the one thing is that Coretti's last child, I don't know where they are, and there's a lot of, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I will.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so excited. This is amazing. I have so many questions. Did you ever figure out why your mother had a picture of the Tsar? I'm curious about that. I also am curious about the women that they may have met in Russia. So one of my favorite Russian writers is Anna Akhmatova, and she would have totally overlapped in time with them. And then you sort of mentioned very quickly, you were like, oh, there are all these, troops that are traveling, and there was a fist fight in Helsinki, and I'm like, no, I don't know, actually. So can you tell us a little bit about these, like, black women who are touring the world? And then the last thing is, do you think you might use footnotes in your novel?
Definitely. I mean, this is something that I was talking when I was interviewing Danielle about her work. I mean, absolutely. And like, I have to attribute where I can attribute all the things, right? So that's the first question. Yes, absolutely. I don't know about footnotes, endnotes maybe. But when it comes to, so let me explain something about the title, Starlings. Okay, so these touring groups, oftentimes black women would be called the Black Nightingale, the, Black Birds, the, any bird that was black, any bird that could be made black was part of the the whole thing, right? And so, but I found it so curious that there weren't groups called Starlings, because Starlings are so incredible. These are birds that can mimic any sound, that can move in flight with each other in these amazingly choreographed seeming ways. They are, but they're also considered pests, right? And so for me, I was like, that to me is the embodiment of what these black women were doing. They were just making themselves present in the world and moving together and coming apart. So the Florida Creole girls, yes, and making beautiful shapes and imitating any sound, and could do it better than who they were imitating. So the Florida Creole girls who were in Helsinki at the time, with their impresario, they were the ones who had this fight that the police were called. There's only a couple of troop members in that group that I've been following because they're linked to Harris and to Arl Tietz, who, for example, Minnie Brown, who did come back to the U.S. And then Jenny Shepard, she was part of that group. Minnie Brown wasn't part of Florida Creole Girls, excuse me. Anyway, so there are lots of groups to keep right on top of. I'm going to stop there. What, you asked me another question? Oh yeah, so Anna Akhmatova, who is one of my favorite poets as well, she was actually spent a lot of her time during this period in exile. And so they never, this was unfortunately not a connection that I could make in real life, but it's not to say that it couldn't be in other ways. But I think in terms of poets and guides around, especially around this sort of the grief of war, is, yeah, her work is really influential. Okay.
Two more questions.
Okay.
Selena and Jordan.
Hi, Asale. Now I understand why you said we need to talk, after my talk. And then I just see so many like crossings in terms of dates and then all these like amazing events that happen that share such a strong relationship to China as well in terms of Black internationalism. I was just wondering whether, I'm curious whether, the two figures that you mentioned, Coretti and Emma, the kind of international visions that were so different from each other and how they also saw that, or that their internationalisms being different from, let's say, Hughes and Dorothy West and so forth.
So I think, so I can speak to this more clearly about Emma because she made it very clear her stance on world politics. Coretti was apparently a very reserved person, which anyway. So Emma saw herself. I mean, she was part of the Third International. One of the slides, Emma Goldman is up there as listed as questionable enemy or associate. I don't know. Anyway, but because of Emma's role in the party, which she would sort of enter into and out of, she was among the first people to be put in contact with Americans, right? Like, oh, go talk to this person. Oh, go talk to this person. And so that put her in touch with a lot of people. She saw herself as an international person. Like there was no way that she was going to, she totally, completely did not identify with being American. And heavily, in the beginning, heavily supported the revolution. I don't know what else to say about that. I don't know, was there anything else? I'm starting to lose my train of thought here. Okay.
The different trajectories.
Oh, different trajectories. Yeah, I mean, again, most of this is speculation because there's not, there aren't memoirs, or, there aren't journals that I can pull from. And in fact, I've tried to reach out to some of Emma's family, but in the U.S., people who write in saying, oh, I'm her fifth great cousin, or something, and then you kind of do a little genealogical research, and you're like, that's not, that can't be. And so, anyway, so there doesn't seem to be any lasting manuscripts from either one of them, and even the letters that are written, that are held in the state archive. That I'm trying to remember her last name, Yevgenia. Her last name will come to me. Who writes her work on Coretti, and she has access to these letters. I can't get a hold of them, so, yeah.
No direct descendants?
For Coretti has direct descendants, and Emma does not have any direct descendants.
In Russia or here?
In Russia, Coretti has direct descendants, and in Russia, Emma has cousins and brothers, cousin and a brother who lived in New York City, but for much of that time, she was not in touch with them. She was in Russia, and then she comes back to the US for that last part of her life. And clearly, I think the last, Ted Poston wrote a piece on her where she's actually in a nursing home. And so she seems to be pretty much alone. Yeah. So.
One last question?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, Jordan.
Yeah, well, thanks for this fascinating talk. I learned lots from it. And, it had me thinking there's, burgeoning scholarship over the last, is it up now? Okay.
Yeah.
There's been burgeoning scholarship over the last 10 or 15 years over, black women, black communist women in particular. So I'm thinking of like Imani Perry's work on Lane Hansberry, Mary Helen Washington, Robin Kelly, Eric McDuffie. But a lot of that work, whether it's about Claudia Jones, Louise Patterson, Esther Cooper Jackson's focused on the U.S. So I just wonder what you think shifts when we shift the geography to the experiences of black women in the Soviet Union in this period.
Okay. One thing that I'm going to take your question, I'm going to trouble it a little bit. Okay. I'm not interested in doing these sort of side-by-side comparisons of like, this is what happened. Only in terms of how it serves these women and how they felt about themselves and their relationships, right? Now, having said that, obviously when you focus in on one specific location, these are women who traveled back and forth, not just to the US, but they were traveling all over the world, right? And so I think that, we end up spending, especially in these last 25 years, we spend way too much time marveling at the sort of possibilities of black transnationalism, cosmopolitanism, and the Black Atlantic. And we lose sight of the lives of real people because we're commenting so much on the fact that people traveled. And I'm not interested in that. And there are excellent books that talk about all of this in a different way or footnote these women. Obviously, I'm not the only person Ida Forsin, who is not mentioned here, is also in Russia, and she leaves. And Ida Forsin, and Jana Brown has a great article and book where she talks about Ida and others. And so for me, I'm less concerned about the question of travel. I hope that answers your question. Because it's limited, if that makes sense. Did I respond to your question, or do you have something else?
And our very own Richard Greener.
Yes.
Was the
yeah, that's right.
Richard Greener, the first black graduate of
That's
Harvard,
right.
was the whatever his title.
He was a consul in
Vladivostok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Richard Greener graduated from Harvard College in 1870.
yeah.
He went on. He was very prominent. He got his law degree. He was dean of the Howard Law School, but he was the consul, which is like being the ambassador in a consulate in Vladivostok, which is, the far end of Russia.
Right. And I was trying to put he and Emma together to see if they'd ever met, because when she was in the Gulag in 1905, he left in 1905. So they overlapped because he would have been the person that she would have contacted.
Well, according to your novel, they had an affair.
That's right.
And
you never know.
Maybe had a baby together.
He was very handsome.
That's right,
So,
very handsome. And then, no, he was the one who arranged to get her out of the Gulag. You're the novelist.
Exactly.
They could meet at the dark end of the street.
That's right. Yes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
I can't wait till Mariel. My wife went to Moscow State.
That's right.